Hi, welcome to the Great Immigrant Dream podcast, where we will talk to immigrant entrepreneurs and unravel their journey of entrepreneurship. These are people who came in with nothing to a different country with a different culture, different language, and entirely different ecosystem, and ended up creating something big in entrepreneurship and making a mark for themselves. We will capture their stories of courage in overcoming the innumerable challenges that immigrants face, their determination through all these difficulties. These are stories of immigrants who are true embodiments of the great American dream. I'm your host, Kumar V, an immigrant entrepreneur myself, and I want to inspire you to fulfill your great immigrant dream. Hello and welcome to the Great Immigrant Dream podcast. I'm your host, Kumar V, and today we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Jennie Milton. She likes to call herself Jennie Milton, and we'll know more about that. She's an athlete, she's a coach, she is an author, and she's a speaker. Like, she wears so many hats, and she is passionate about sharing her knowledge, sharing her experience with people. And that is one of the motivations why Jennie is here today. And I think she has an amazing story, as we will uncover in the next 20-30 minutes to go. Jennie, did I miss anything in your introduction? I know you wear so many hats. Please add to that.
Hello, Kumar. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast today. I'm so excited to share some stories and some lessons with you and your listeners. You introduced me beautifully. Thank you so much.
Jennie, tell me a little more about your middle name, Adrenogen.
Adrenogen. It's like Adrenaline Jennie. And I was given that nickname by my brother long ago. I grew up in Australia. You can probably hear by my accent, got that Aussie twang. And my parents had a sports store from when my brother and I were born. So we grew up with parents as entrepreneurs. They were in the retail business, and we had the best upbringing because they sold sporting equipment. And as all the sporting stuff came into fashion, they would sell it in their stores, and my brother and I would get to try it out and test it. And I was always into the adrenaline-based sports and activities like freestyle skiing and rollerblading and kite surfing. And so my brother gave me that nickname long ago, and it's just stuck.
And that's great. I'm not a lot into adventure sports, but whatever little I've done, I think I've done almost all the famous adventure sports at least one time. When I look at my pictures from when I was skydiving, that video recording, I'll tell you, I have never been happier. I was smiling cheek to cheek, like here to here. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. So there is something, I think adventure sports, it brings out what otherwise is latent or hidden in all of us. So, and you made that as your life journey. So I'm sure we got a lot to learn from you and get inspired from your journey.
I'm glad you felt that big smile on your face when you do something that's seen as scary, right? We want to do something and we experience a lot of fear. And once you jump out of that plane or you drop into that mountain to ski, you feel this joy of going outside your comfort zone and building that confidence and doing something so exciting. It gets your adrenaline rushing.
So Jennie, you mentioned fear. One of the biggest challenges for immigrants when they move to any country, like you and I, we move to the US, or immigrants to any other country, one of the biggest challenges is that we are faced with a culture like where we do not speak the same language, or we have a different accent like you and I do. Culturally, there are so many different things, different food, different lifestyle. Of course, there is fear, there is self-doubt. This podcast captures the story of people who moved, who transformed that fear into a successful entrepreneurial venture. So Jennie, please share your story regarding, how you transformed this.
That's a great question. I'd love to share. I'm going to actually share back to when I was 19 years old. And I was offered my first job overseas, and I actually traveled to Hong Kong to work for about 4 months. At the age of 19, that was a new experience for me. That fear was very raw. It was a different language, and it really gave me the chance to learn how to integrate into another country and their cultures and their systems. And one of the things I learned back then, especially as a woman traveling to China, I was going into, I was actually in wholesale. I was selling to retailers, rollerblades. It was back in the rollerblade days, heydays when rollerblades were super fun and exciting. And I would go into these sports stores and ask to speak to the owner and the buyer, and I would introduce them to the products. I would normally rollerblade into the store. I'd have them on my feet, so I was living the lifestyle. And I discovered very quickly that the businessmen were not used to dealing with a woman. That was not the normal culture for them. I also discovered that when I went to the schools in order to start rollerblade hockey teams, train some kids up so that we could do shows in the shopping centers, I realized that a lot of the kids at the school were not allowed to do fun after school activities like I grew up doing in Australia. Their culture taught them to go home and study. And no wonder those guys are so intelligent and smart, because they spend a lot more time studying than in my culture, where after school we get to go and play. And so that was my first experience of integrating into another culture, but it was just a short job. I've had other jobs where I've worked in Japan. I have grown up with my parents having that sports store, and I've always said I've been part of the ski industry. If you ask me what industry am I in, I'm in the ski industry. My parents sold skis and boots, and we went to all the winter trade shows. And about 30,000 Australians go skiing in Japan every year. So it was a natural progression for a lot of the Aussie ski industry to actually move to Japan in the opposite seasons. Our winter in Australia is right now. It's from June until October, right? And then the Northern Hemisphere, their winter is right now. It's summertime right now. I get all confused. The winter time is sort of starting in December until March or April. And so I was able to work in one country in the wintertime in Australia, and then I would seasonally work in other countries in the Northern Hemisphere in their winter. And so I grew up getting introduced to many different countries, cultures, people, and that was such an amazing learning experience. But it wasn't until I decided to make one of my dreams come true, and that was to go heli skiing in Alaska. As a skier, it was always my dream to not be on those little hills in Australia. And yes, we do have snow in Australia. For everybody listening that doesn't think we have snow, we do have a good ski season from June till October. But the mountains are not big and pointy like they are in Alaska. And so seeing all of the movies of these big pointy mountains and people leaving these beautiful tracks down the mountains, that was something I always wanted to do. And when I went to the US, I actually went for a trade show. So it was still part of my business world. They had a big trade show in Las Vegas where I got to see all the latest sporting equipment. And that was a great time to be introduced to that, the latest new thing, in order to take it back to my family business in Australia. And after that trade show, I went up to Alaska and I made that dream come true. And that was the turning point of my life. Sometimes those dreams that we have are not just a dream of a holiday on a beautiful sunny beach or a holiday of having something on your bucket list ticked off. When I had that dream come true, it totally changed my life. I experienced the most incredible sport of heli skiing. You got to fly around in a helicopter, which was so exciting. My adrenaline was already pumping before I even got out on top of the mountain. And then, of course, dropping in on one of these big mountains was one of the scariest things I'd ever done in my life. And be careful what we wish for, because it might just happen. And I remember dropping into that mountain just being so scared. And then I finally, the helicopter took off. I didn't have a choice of chickening out. It was like I had no choice but to ski down that mountain. And I remember I had a couple of falls on the way down. And when I got to the bottom, I burst into tears. And that was not tears of sadness. That was tears of just pure joy, proudness, excitement. It's even hard to put into words because there was so much emotion flowing. And after that happened, I got to meet so many people that make that their life. It's not just a dream for a week. They work as heli ski guides. The people that live in Alaska get to experience those mountains every day. Their culture and their lifestyle was so incredible to me because they live in the freezing cold weather all the time. Some of them had no running water in the winter because their pipes would freeze. A lot of them, their heat was from chopping wood for months in the summertime so they could have enough wood to stay warm. But the thing that impressed me the most were the women that lived there. They were the true meaning of badass. I mean, these ladies they were athletes. They were self-sufficient. They were looking after themselves. And I wanted to be like them too. And that really started the journey of me wanting to live that life and not the one I had back home. Because when I did go back home, I really fell into some depression. I realized that wasn't the life I wanted to lead. I wanted to go back to Alaska, back to the US, and become one of these badass women that I'd met. And that was really the start of my journey of wanting to be in that country.
Tell us a little more about the challenges, especially in your entrepreneurial journey. So you came to Alaska. You decided to move back to Alaska to live that dream. You then ended up becoming an entrepreneur. Tell us a little about that journey, the challenges, fear, what was going on in your mind then?
Well, that was actually one of my biggest struggles was I wanted to spend as much time as I could in the US, and I managed to get a 12-month visa from my country. And in that 12 months, I fell in love with the people, the country, and I also fell in love with a man named Steve, who is now my husband of 16 years. But it really made me realize that I wanted to be there, but I didn't have everything in place in order to start a business or even get a job. I wasn't allowed to, with that tourist visa, wasn't allowed to work. And I realized that my money was starting to run out, and I was going to need to figure out how I could stay in this country. And that was very, very difficult. And I came up with a few ideas, of working under the table. But in fact, I got into trouble for that. I figured out very quickly that you really had to do things the right way in the US. And I had to dive into, the paperwork and figuring out how I was going to earn a living in the US. And I'm just lucky that I also fell in love at the same time. And this wonderful man, Steve, agreed. We decided we would get married. It didn't happen instantly. We actually did the long distance thing for about 5 or 6 years. I would go back home to Australia. I would work. I would earn some money. Then I would go back to the US and I would enjoy my time with him. And we didn't marry because I wanted to start a life in the US. We married for love. And we really made that long distance relationship work incredibly well until we made the decision to get married.
For listeners who have not been through that journey of an immigrant coming to the US and trying to settle down here, all of that, it takes so much of your headspace. It is so daunting. It is, of course, it's very daunting. When did you actually start your business? Were you already getting some customers during this phase when you were moving between Australia, US? When did you create your company? When did you formalize it? And how did you do that?
Well, I grew up with parents being entrepreneurs, and we all tend to follow in our parents' footsteps a little bit. And so it was very natural for me. I'd already been running my own business in Australia. And when I went home to Australia every year, I would be running my own business there. And my business at that stage was sharing my passion and my love for skiing, the backcountry, and also flying kites. And many people say to me, "What, you can have a business flying kites? What are you talking about, Jenny?" And I had discovered the sport of kiteboarding. It was becoming very popular, and flying a kite with a board on your feet on the water was becoming very popular. And while I was in Australia, I did all of my certifications to become a qualified kiteboarding instructor. But at the same time, I discovered when I was up in Alaska, I took my kites up there, that you could actually use the same kites with your skis or your snowboard on and get towed around on the mountain. I'd never seen anybody doing it before, but my husband and I kind of just figured it out that it worked just as well on snow as it did on the water. And that was something new that people had never seen before. So I started teaching people. I used the skills that I was learning in the backcountry up in Alaska from those incredible mountain guides. I would go back to Australia and teach backcountry skills, teach people how to fly kites with their skis and snowboard on, to give them the freedom to cruise around on the snow outside of ski resorts. And I got a name for myself. All of a sudden, Jennie became known as the snowkiter. And I got some media attention. There are a lot of skiers and snowboarders who are into extreme sports, so it was the perfect market for myself. And then when I went back to the US, I was able to actually invite Australians over to the US. So I was still working for myself with permission to continue working for my Australian business in the US until all of my paperwork came through and I got a green card. And for those of you going through it, I feel your pain. Keep going. Don't give up. Keep going. And just because you get married doesn't mean they instantly sign off on a green card. It still took multiple years of me jumping through all of the hoops. And even things like, I don't think I've told anyone this story before, but I needed to prove that I'd been vaccinated, right? And I'm in my 40s at this stage. And 40 years ago in Australia, when I was vaccinated, they did it at schools. We all got our, rubella and our tetanus and our this and our that. But that was before computers. So there was no actual, no data on file of me being vaccinated. My mum said she had been given a little booklet 40 years ago that she'd signed off on, but there was no way she knew where that little booklet was 40 years later. So I had no choice but to go back to Australia and get revaccinated.
All of them?
All of them. All of them. I had to have 12 injections of every single childhood vaccination again. And so that was, quite invasive, traumatic. I didn't feel very, very well. I was a bit sick for a little while after that. But they were some of the hoops that I had to jump through in order to be approved with that green card in the US. And then once I got the green card, I was like, okay, it's go time. I can now start my own business in the US. But again, it just wasn't that simple. All of a sudden, I was treated like a little kid because I had no bank account, credit card, and I didn't have a credit rating. So it was like I was just turning 18 and I couldn't get a credit card and I couldn't even start my LLC until I had built up some credit rating. And I'm just so grateful to the help that I got from my husband and even his dad to sign off and be a guarantor for me to get me through those early stages.
And these are everything that you're saying are, the real world challenges, especially faced by immigrants. In Australia, you had your own business and everything going great. And here you start from zero, like literally no credit score, no history. And then you take one step, as you said, it's like being 18 when you're trying to get a driver's license and a bank account and whatnot. It is daunting. And that's what separates immigrants from others. Immigrants, all of us, we have to go through extra hoops, as you said. But there are these mindset qualities which, for example, I think grit and resilience and determination are certain qualities which I think I see in almost all successful immigrant entrepreneurs. What would you say, Jennie, was, in terms of mindset, what would you say were the few factors that sort of, kept you inspired to go on pushing despite all of these challenges? And I'm sure there would be many more which you've not even spoken about in this short podcast.
Kumar, you've given me goosebumps just thinking about that question, because that word that kept me going is passion. Passion. I remember getting a coach to help me, and I advise anybody, it's really hard on your own. If you can get a coach that can help you take some of these steps, that's very helpful. And I remember the conversation I had with my coach. I was like, should I go and work for somebody and just get a job and work for somebody else and get in the system and earn some money? Or do I continue trying to start my own business and being an entrepreneur? And she said, what are you more passionate about? I said, well, I'm more passionate about teaching people to fly kites on snow and skiing. And she's like, it's going to be a harder road, but go with your passion, because having a passion and being so passionate about doing it is what's going to keep you going when it gets really tough, right? Really tough. And it does sometimes. And I've now, been teaching snowkiting for only about 15 years in the United States. And I've been jumping through all these hoops, and I've built my brand. I've gotten a name for myself, and it's been worth it. It's been worth it. Seeing the joy that I give people by sharing my knowledge and my skills just makes it all worthwhile. But if you've got a passion and you've got a dream, then stick with it. That's going to get you through.
That's an amazing message, Jennie. When it comes to passion, a lot of people are in the same situation as you were then. Do I go for my passion, or do I sort of, just embrace the practical aspect of life, trying to just make it by? And I have friends, I have peers in both the spaces. And I see that the people who are living their passion, they at times have financial difficulties and other difficulties. But despite that, there is a joy in living your passion, which which anyone who's not living this passion maybe cannot even understand until they move to that joy of living your passion. That's amazing. That is a beautiful, beautiful advice. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me from our conversation up until now, that's what it is. And you said it's right. It becomes so difficult. If you're doing something which is a drudgery for you, you cannot go on doing it 18 hours a day. Passion just changes the whole game. That is amazing. So other than your coach and your family and their support, passion versus practicality, I want to stay a little more on this, because one of the aims of this podcast is to inspire people who are on the cusp of entrepreneurship, like you were 15 years ago. They know they have it in them, but they've not yet taken the plunge. And this is a great question. So passion, you would also have done your practical analysis, like, maybe looking at the customers, all of that stuff. It's a little more about choosing a business where you're passionate about.
Having that passion is step number one. And you're so right. It just keeps a smile on your face when you're talking about what you love. Then it comes down to the practical side of things. And as we do a lot of our business training, and I'm still learning, Kumar, I'm constantly doing courses on business and learning and staying up with all the latest technology. And something they talk about a lot these days is funnels. You need a funnel to drive the business to you. And that can be something as simple as having a lead magnet and having people sign up into your emails. But it also comes down to funneling in your market, your niche market. Who are the people that you can serve and that who want to be helped by you? And for me, it was the ski industry. It was those skiers and those snowboarders who already knew how to ski and snowboard, but they're getting fed up in the ski resorts because the lines are too long and the tickets are too expensive. And now they're all getting into the backcountry, but they've got to go and do avalanche courses, and they've got to have all these extra tools in their backpack that they don't quite know how to use or have that experience. And so I knew who my market was. And then it was just a matter of figuring out, well, how do I funnel those people in? I also had the kiteboarders, the people who already fly kites on the water. And you know what? They're extreme athletes too. They love to ski and snowboard in the wintertime, and they kite in the summertime, but they haven't put their two loves of their sports together like I had. And I definitely decided that women, I love sharing my knowledge with women and building confidence, because in our world of even business and sport, it's very male dominated, and it can be quite intimidating for women because we can be lacking in our confidence and self-esteem. So I knew I wanted to run women's programs as well. And I'll share one of, my greatest funnels that I discovered and worked out was when I was up in Alaska My husband is working as a heli ski guide. I'm up in Alaska. I'm trying to get my business going. I discovered that all of those people that fly up to Alaska to go heli skiing, they can only do it when the sky is blue and the sun is out. As soon as it gets windy, the helicopter can't fly, or if it's stormy and the visibility is low, you've got all of these people who are sitting around in their location and unable to do the thing that they want to do. So all of a sudden, I was able to go to those companies and offer my services to allow their customers to go and have a great time on those days when they were all a bit down in the mouth because they weren't heli skiing and making their dream come true. And that turned out really, really well. All of a sudden, I had a funnel of the right people. I was able to help another company keep their customers happy, and their customers that were coming out snowkiting with me during the day were having a great time, and they were going back to the restaurant and the bar afterwards and saying, wow, we just learned to snowkite. We had this great time with this Aussie girl, Adrenogen, and she took us out and we were cruising around. We had a great time out in the storm. And there were other people who had decided just to drink whiskey all day and get drunk and drown their sorrows, right? And so all of a sudden, people started wanting to do, they called it the down day activities, because it was a down day for them, but it was an up day for me. And so that's just an example of how you can find your market and also another company and work together in order to keep everybody's clients happy, as well as building my business at the same time.
That's such a great example, which I believe is an inspiration for everyone who is on the cusp of entrepreneurship. My takeaway is two things. A, finding how to solve people's problems on the down day, like rather than sitting and gulping whiskey. What else? Solving people's problems and making others successful, which you did by making the ski resort businesses and other businesses successful by solving a challenge which they did not know. And both of these cases, if they pay money, that's a business. So Jennie, that's an amazing, amazing practical advice for anyone who wants to become an entrepreneur, or even for people who are on that path and feel a little stuck. Jennie, the last couple questions I want to ask you. First of all, I know you're living your passion. So when you're living your passion, there is sort of, almost a blurred line between passion and work and down and rest time and stuff. Well, what does Adrenogen do when she is not coaching people, when she's not training, when she's not running a business?
Great question, Kumar. And I'd love to share something that I've been going through recently. And for so many years, my passion was my business and it was my pleasure as well. Passion and pleasure go together. And if I wasn't teaching others to snowkite, I was snowkiting myself. But I've recently, over the last couple of years, as I'm aging, I'm discovering that, through injury, I'm unable to do some of those sports and passions that I love. And then this year, I actually was diagnosed with some brain aneurysms. And only 2 weeks ago, I had my third brain surgery this year, which is a very traumatic time for me. And I'm doing great. Look, my brain's still working. I'm doing really well. But the lessons that I'm learning through this journey is about pivoting our passions. Pivoting our passions. It's very easy when you're told by your doctor or your body tells you can't do something anymore. It's very easy to go into a state of depression and sadness. And it happened to me. I was grieving my sport. I was grieving my dreams. And I needed to figure out how I could go from those tears back to cheers by finding out what was going to make me happy. And I discovered that I didn't have to give up my sports. I didn't have to give up my passions. I just needed to pivot them a little bit. And so I still, to this day, I went out yesterday, I'm still flying kites. I've just changed the size of my kite and the style of my kite. So instead of using those big inflatable kites that tow me up mountains and tow me out in the waves, I'm now using a smaller kite called a stunt kite that has 4 lines. And boy, I'm learning a whole new skill set. I've been flying kites for over 20 years and I'm learning some new maneuvers with this stunt kite that doesn't pull me. So there's no chance that I'm going to fall over and hit my head. It's not as dangerous, but I'm calling it my brain training. I'm still able to go out there, keep my brain activated. It puts a huge smile on my face. And even the other day when I was in quite a lot of pain, I went out and flew my kite. And afterwards I said to my husband, I didn't feel any pain while I was flying my kite because I had joy replace that pain. So I'd pivoted my passion. And, we can all do that as we get injured, illness, or age, is just figuring out how we can change it or adapt it a little bit in order to keep that passion alive.
Jennie, I'm sorry to hear about, the brain surgery and your brain aneurysm. But at the same time, what I see is you are a living embodiment of courage. I have never met anyone. I've seen a lot of people dwindle down mentally first and then physically more after any such setback hits them. But you are a living embodiment of courage, of how to transform that courage even to your business. I learned, you reinforced my whole belief in the art of pivoting. So pivoting, we talked about pivoting, we talked about your courage, we talked about how to solve people's problems and make them successful. There are so many amazing things to pick up from your journey, which I would want my listeners to get inspired by. That has been inspirational to me, Jennie. Jennie, last question, where can people find you and connect with you? And I'm sure many would, because this is an amazing story. You're an amazing person.
Thank you so much. Well, you can find me at Adrenogen. So if you can remember my nickname, you'll find me at adrenogen.com, my website, Adrenogen on Facebook, Adrenogen on Instagram. And you'll also find me now talking about my new book. One of the things that happened through this journey of dealing with all this brain surgery is I couldn't share my passion and my knowledge with all those extreme skiers and snowboarders anymore if I couldn't do the sport myself. But what I decided to do was to not give those up. Again, I pivoted my passion in order to share my love of wind and my love of kites with others. And so I decided to write a children's book. And I've written a beautiful children's book. It's got great illustrations. It's called Gale and the Red Kite of Courage. And I'm sharing some of these lessons that we've talked about today, sharing them with kids for the next generation of wind warriors. And you'll find me at schools speaking to kids in their class and teaching them all about wind and weather. And we make kites out of paper and popsicle sticks. And I'm getting so much joy out of continuing to share my knowledge with others. I've just changed the age group a little bit for now while I'm, in this more fragile state. And I'm really, really enjoying that. So thank you so much for having me, because I'm also enjoying sharing my lessons and stories with others. And I'm so grateful for you having me on today. And I hope your listeners and audience have enjoyed my stories and maybe learned something that they can use in their own life's challenges too.
Thank you. I have learned a lot. So thank you, Jennie. Thank you for your time. So for all our listeners, this is Adrenogen, an amazing story, an inspirational story of courage, grit, determination, and the art of pivoting. Please connect with her, find her, and I'm going to gift a copy of your book to my 8-year-old.
Oh.
So, and I would recommend even others to do that. That is amazing. Adrenogen, thank you for your time. You are an inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kura. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Great Immigrant Dream podcast. Keep dreaming, keep striving, and remember, the immigrant spirit knows no bounds.